So, leveling was broken in MMORPGs for quite a while, and it doesn't really work. It doesn't really interest new people in playing those kinds of games, and that's a big problem because that's one of the big reasons why MMORPGs stagnate, why they don't really get new player base, why they don't really have any incentive to create new content for new players rather than focusing on only development of content for the end game in those games. And here's how to fix one major problem, at least with leveling, in my opinion, is if your games, and especially MMORPGs, are trying to do that in recent times, in recent 10 years, are trying to cater more towards solo players. They're trying to make everything accessible, everything more casual friendly, everything more easy and approachable. Then one of the main reasons that you need to look up at single player games is because you're trying to get more of audience from single player games towards your games, because solo players are inevitably played single player games for big portions of their time, and now if you want to get them to play your game, you'll have to fight for their attention, and MMOs don't really do that because they're early leveling in most parts with most successful MMORPGs like World of Warcraft, Final Fantasy, Elder Scrolls Online, Guild Wars 2. Early leveling experience is hilariously boring. It's dull, it's hollow. There is literally, it's mind-numbing experience when you have 2 or 3 skills and everything is one-shotable. You don't really have to use any healing spells. You can aggro like 3-5 mobs, don't see any consequences. In MMORPG, in World of Warcraft, for example, early dungeons are scaled that way that level 10s are just steamrolling through the dungeons, while level 50 characters are struggling way more. And that's all because of the scaling system, and it's broken as well. It definitely, that's quite a good way for your players to be able to interact if they're level 15 and level 60, and if you have this scaling, they can both go to the same dungeon and receive same amount of experience and stuff. That's very cool, but instead this provides a world that levels with you, and you don't really feel the progression that good. Items are just +1/+1 stats when you're hitting new level and stuff. So from all the perspectives, this type of leveling is boring, and no single player person who likes single player games will stick with this formula for more than 5 or 10 or 20 minutes, because if you're going in the game and it's too easy for you and you don't really have, that's one of the main stuff that I want to bring your attention to in this video. If you don't really have any way to make this content more difficult, I don't say that this content always has to be difficult, because some people definitely just want to breeze through the leveling, don't really feel anything during that process, maybe watch some videos while they're learning their class bit by bit and don't be stressed for anything difficult. But in all single player games you have this difficulty variability that you can opt in or opt out of. You can always take a level of difficulty in different like titles, like in Skyrim, in Witcher, in Divinity Original Sin. You just can take either story mode where you don't really have to do anything. Enemies are one-shotable. You don't need to use consumables. You don't really think about healing yourself after the fights. So you don't really think if you can engage into an enemy or you can't do that. And they all have medium difficulty, hard difficulty, and like some more hardcore experience for the people that really like to challenge them. And on that note, what games were quite popular in the recent times in single player environment, and when to be honest, quite many MMORPG players went to play them as well. They were Dark Souls, Elden Ring, Valheim. And these games are not really easy. These games don't have this difficulty toggle, and people still play them in big numbers. They're still very popular. They're still very successful. Valheim is a bit of a middle ground. It's not as hard. It's not as difficult, especially if you're preparing yourself to do content in there and you're like maximizing your character. But Dark Souls and Elden Ring definitely show us that difficulty is an interesting point for the players, and they want to have it if they want it. And MMORPGs currently just don't really have this system in place for people to be interested while they're leveling. The leveling, it was made very accessible, very easy, just mind-numbing, to be honest. And there is no way for you to switch to the more difficult way of leveling and maybe get some profits for that. You can reward it with different cosmetics. You can reward it with some early end game progression while you're leveling. So if you're taking higher difficulty level, and it will require you to, so yeah, if you're taking bigger difficulty, I think that it should be awarded with more experience per kills. So this way of leveling should be faster than more easy one. That's why this way people are incentivized to do that, and you don't really need to create leveling as hard as your toughest end game activities. There's no need in that. But if you are creating more challenging fights with enemies on lower levels, and you're awarding with way more experience, like 2x, 3x, 5x experience, so that a person will level through the game instead of 20 hours in 10 or 5 hours, and they will have way more challenging and engaging combat. And maybe you can, if you don't want to go with such a high rates of experience increase, you can give some collectibles for doing that. Maybe some collectibles on the class specific, for example. So if person is leveling up their alts and they don't really want to go through this mind-numbing, boring experience of easy leveling, you can give some class specific cosmetics this way. If person doesn't have a character of this class, they will definitely be interested in doing that. Then you definitely can incentivize more of a group play, more hard group play content, where you again can incentivize it with either faster experience or some additional progression rewards, maybe a bit of progression skip on the end game. So if you're taking this difficult route of leveling, especially if it's maybe group oriented, so it can be open world locations with elite mobs where you just 100% need a group that consists of tank, healer, and DPS, or anyways how it is done in Guild Wars 2 or other MMOs, or it is just gonna be harder difficulty of dungeons for leveling with, for example, I definitely think that there should be a bigger experience rate with, for example, bigger experience rate with some rewards. And maybe if we're taking World of Warcraft, for example, here, it's one of the most popular MMORPGs, so I think that this example will be quite correct in here. So in World of Warcraft, you can provide a skip of maybe normal to heroic dungeon gear levels in the end game if you're succeeding in this difficult route of leveling with your character. So if you've taken this mode and you've leveled up to the end game, to the highest level, then you're awarded instantly with this like normal to heroic dungeon level gear, or maybe some like basic so with some basic gear that is it isn't really rewarded to you on high level if you're if it's not really a reward for hard content on the end game as well, but that's definitely gonna be pretty cool to have it and to go instantly into, for example, Mythic Plus or raiding, especially for people who already played through the quite difficult content, through the leveling, and they definitely have experience with their classes. They definitely took this hard route, and they can go into more hardcore content just instantly. So yeah, that's what I think that developers definitely should look into, and that's what they're losing on. They're losing a good chunk of potential player base just by scaring off these new players, because their leveling experience is so bad. It is so bad. It is so hard to get your friends playing World of Warcraft or any other big MMORPG if they've played like, I don't know, Doom or maybe God of War or Witcher or Dark Souls, and they like games like that. It's so hard for them to get in your MMORPG, because you're like, okay, friend, let's go, and they're going with you. They're trying to play it. You're playing for like 3-4 hours, and that's all mind-numbingly boring, easy leveling where you don't really challenge it. It's not really interesting for them if they are used to some difficulty level of single player games, for example, or maybe they're from PvP MOBAs or shooters where it's definitely not easy as well to play those games, and they want to be challenged at least a little bit, and you're saying to them like, in 10 hours, in 20 hours it's gonna be way better. We're gonna have some like cooperative experience. You're gonna heal me, I'm gonna defend you, or I'm gonna like interrupt these casts. You're gonna have to dodge abilities of enemies. No, we wouldn't be able to aggro all these mobs, and that's gonna be in 10 or 20 hours. That's a failure. That's a massive failure from the developer's standpoint, in my opinion, and that shouldn't be the case in these games. So yeah, that's one of the things that I wanted to say. Thanks for watching. Hope you're having a blessed. Goodbye.